Christmas is almost upon us, and I don't know about you, but when it comes to Christmas, one thing I think about is model trains. Maybe you have one running under your Christmas tree, or perhaps you've asked for some on your Christmas list and are hoping that you'll receive them on the big day itself. No peeking though. One of the most famous model train companies is, of course, Hornby. For many years, they've produced a range of Thomas models, some of which I remember getting for Christmas growing up. In 2018, the Hornby Thomas range was discontinued, at which point it was the longest running Thomas toy or model line there had ever been, although I believe the Playrail Thomas range now holds that record. Following the discontinuation of the Hornby Thomas range, some of the body toolings were repurposed for non-Thomas models, and I thought we'd have a look at some today. A few years ago, Hornby brought out a train pack featuring, of all things, the Only Fools and Horses licence. Along with the Trotter's independent trading box van and a Peckham Spring water tanker, they brought out a tank engine in the Trotter's independent trading paint scheme. The design they chose for the body has its origins in a variation of the Hornby Thomas. Along with the standard 060 Thomas they'd been using since the 1980s, in the 1990s they brought out this smaller Thomas for starter sets. People often claim that this body originated from the Hornby Clockwork Thomas, but that's not true. The Clockwork Thomas uses a different, and in my opinion more accurate body design versus the electric 040 Thomas, which has a longer running board with a shallower dip at the front. The cab is also different, the roof having a more prominent arch shape on the electric model. It's been a long time since I watched any episodes of Only Fools and Horses. I remember it was one of those shows that was rerun incessantly on TV during the 2000s, along with Top Gear. Perhaps it's still repeated ad nauseum on TV today. I'd probably know if I actually watch TV these days. I decided to add what I did remember about the show, such as the Nelson Mandela house in the background. I also had to include Del Boy and Rodney into the scene, drawn in a style reminiscent of the human figures from Thomas and Friends, while still looking like themselves. Going back to the Hornby model, I recall that a lot of people decried it as a piece of cheap tat to cash in on a popular IP. And whilst I'm not going to claim that it isn't that, I also feel as though there was a lot more thought and effort put into this model as compared to the horrendous Beatles trains they keep making. I suppose the fact that it's tying into a sitcom rather than a band means that there's more story potential to be had. Speaking of story potential, I wonder how Thomas ended up in Peckham in the first place. Maybe he was returning home from the National Railway Museum, or perhaps the big city from Thomas and the Special Letter, and took a wrong turn. Now he suddenly found himself painted yellow and delivering dodgy goods to sell on the black market. I've decided to depict a winter scene for these 3 illustrations, given that this is a Christmas special. Only Fools and Horses often makes me think of Christmas, despite not being inherently Christmassy, a bit like Wallace and Gromit. I think that's because it eventually got to the point where the only new episodes of the show would premiere around Christmas time. And with all that said, here is the finished drawing. Hornby have reused their Percy model twice outside of the Thomas range. The first was in this cobalt blue livery for T. Brown Distilleries. A couple of years ago I posted this drawing onto Twitter, depicting Percy in this livery and speculating that this is how he may have looked before being sold to the engine workshop that the Fat Controller bought him from. So for this video I'm going to be drawing Percy in the other livery that Hornby painted him in, British Railways Black. Although Percy is a fictional type of engine that never works on British Railways, I actually don't think this model looks all that bad. I think the main point of contention for a lot of people was the asking price, which was about £50. Not great when Hornby's basic 040s were almost pocket money price until fairly recently. But the question remains, what reason would Percy have to wear British Railways colours? He was never owned by BR. Well, I suppose he technically was, but as he was part of the northwestern region of British Railways, he kept his pre-existing green colour scheme. Since Percy canonically became a Sodor engine before the formation of British Railways, a repaint into BR Black would have had to have reasons more complex than just Percy's old livery. Most likely it would have had to be part of a disguise, so Percy could prevent himself from being noticed. Then I thought about Percy's friends on the mainland. They're all painted in BR Black, and listen to the stories Percy tells them about his adventures. Perhaps Percy ended up over-embellishing his stories to the point where they stopped being recountings of real incidents and more just completely made-up tales. This would be fine if he told his friends this beforehand, but they still believed that everything Percy told them was true. Eventually, word got out that Percy was telling them complete works of fiction and passing them off as the truth. To make a long story short, Percy's name was Mud. The engines on the mainland didn't trust him anymore, and either kept their distance or hurled abuse at him. But there were still times when Percy needed to deliver stone to the mainland, and so Percy went to the works to have himself repainted into BR Black, in the hope that the other engines wouldn't notice him. As you can see by the expressions of Webster and Ewan, it hasn't really worked. Percy has a unique shape, and the running number on his cab was a poor choice. The fact that it's in the 30,000s implies that he's an ex-Southern Railway engine, and in fact the number itself belongs to a C2X, a class of tender engine. Perhaps the mainland engines have caught on to the fact that Percy is wearing a disguise, or maybe they're just giving him dirty looks because they think he's a filthy Southerner. The idea of Percy's friendships turning sour is a bit of a shame, and so I like to think that Percy eventually patched things up with the mainland engines, and they all became friends again before seeing each other for the last time. And so, here is the completed picture. One of the brands that Hornby has the license to use is Coca-Cola. Over the years they've made a number of engines and rolling stock featuring the Coca-Cola colours and logo, mainly sold around Christmas time. Hornby have not only made a Coca-Cola themed version of their 040 Thomas, but also the Bagnall 040 diesel that they used to make Dart. They also made a diesel railcar in this livery, and so I've made Daisy the focal point of this illustration. I'll admit I'm bending the rules a little here. Hornby didn't make Daisy in their Thomas range, and the railcar that they did use is a Class 121, whereas Daisy is meant to be a one-off development of the Class 101. However, I thought that drawing Daisy in the Coca-Cola colours would be a fun idea. This scene is meant to depict Elsbridge Station and the goods yard, although much of the yard ends up getting obscured by the engines in the final illustration. I decided to draw Thomas and Percy getting a good laugh out of Daisy's new livery, whilst Daisy herself finds the whole thing to be a bit vulgar. I can't blame her, to be honest. There's something to be said about the over-commercialisation of Christmas, and Coca-Cola in particular have recently been basing their Christmas advertising campaigns around generating outrage. I guess all publicity is good publicity as far as they're concerned. In fact, I'm going to move swiftly on to prevent myself from perpetuating the cycle. One thing that gets me into the Christmas mood is listening to Christmas songs. Although I'm not massive on the pop songs that you frequently hear in stores and on the radio around this time, like Last Christmas, All I Want for Christmas Is You and so on. At the risk of outing myself as unk, as the kids of today might say, I'm more partial to the big band, show-tuney or more traditional Christmas songs by the likes of Nat King Cole, Perry Como, Andy Williams and... Seth MacFarlane? Huh? What could the in-universe reason be for Daisy being painted up in this livery? Well, usually there's a Coca-Cola Christmas truck that tours various countries in the lead up to Christmas. Maybe this year the truck couldn't make it to Sodor, and the only lorries capable of doing the job were too horrid, and so the tour was taken to the rails. Daisy happened to be in the right place at the right time, or, if you asked her, the wrong place at the wrong time. But, with that said and done, here is the completed illustration. And there we are. 3 Hornby engines that look a bit like Thomas characters, redrawn as those Thomas characters, with a Christmassy twist. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and hopefully it's helped you to get into the festive spirit. If I don't see you beforehand, then I hope you have a Merry Christmas, a happy winter holiday and whatever it is that you're celebrating, and I'll see you next week.